So welcome everybody, thanks for being here. We're very honored to be hosting this event tonight. It's our first time hosting Women in Tech, so this is amazing that you guys all found your way here. It is going to be my part to talk about data from a slightly different perspective or from a slightly different angle. I'm Hanna Waldenmaier, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Usercentrics. I've been part of the company from the very beginning, from its very start. We're growing massively right now. This office is basically way too small currently, so we are looking for new office spaces right now. As you can see, it's very tight. Nevertheless, we're also a little bit involved in big data, and I'm going to tell you a little bit why. The reason why we are dealing with data is because we have developed a consent management platform, right? And today I want to talk about consent management, the new insurance. Work with clean, compliant data and reach new heights. I've already briefly mentioned Usercentrics is a startup. We've grown massively. We've been founded in 2017. We are currently live on different websites, also on enterprise customers such as FC Bayern, Commerzbank, ING, Henry Schein, T-Mobile, and so forth. We're partnering currently also with a lot of tech partnerships, but also agencies to help us also scale the small, medium business market, as every website provider basically needs clean data and therefore needs consent management. This is what surfing looks like in 2019, right? So you visit a website and you're gonna be asked for consent every single time. And it's a mix between being very frustrated about it and sometimes also being very glad about it to be actually asked for consent. But what we can see is that some of those banners that you can see are actually just design pieces. So basically nothing happens in the end. They might ask you for consent, but they don't really care, because what they do in the background is already tracking all your personal data. And this is where we come into play, right? So we've developed a software through which websites and companies can actually get or obtain, manage and document consent of their website visitors. And it's also important for the website providers, right? Because only by having clean data, they can actually use the data compliantly, and that's what we're actually talking about, right? Big data. But this big data needs to be clean and compliant. Just to take one step back, there's been some privacy regulations that I would assume all of you have heard of, GDPR, that have come into place on the 25th of May last year. And also this is kind of a curse for some of you maybe in your business, you having to deal with this. For us it's more like an opportunity, and we think that it is basically an opportunity for all of you guys and for everyone out there in the market. But what does GDPR actually say, or what does it actually contain? So GDPR says that personal data, but also pseudonymous data, needs consent. And what does this actually mean? This actually means that if I want to process some data of yours, I need to ask you for that, right? And you need to tell me whether I'm allowed to actually process this data. And the funny thing about it, it's not only about name and email addresses and stuff, which is quite obvious, right, that is personal data. It's also some characteristics, which is pseudonymized data, for instance, an IP address. Only by opening a website, by downloading the IP address, controllers or processors, in this case Googles and Facebooks and stuff, already get your data. Because there's characteristics in an IP address that can already refer back to a very personal perspective. For instance, if I would say this lady here in this striped blue-green header in the first row of this event is doing something, right? I do not know your name, I do not know your email address, but everyone in this room knows about whom I'm talking to. So this is where it actually becomes very personal, even though I'm not really talking about personal data, right? It's even going to be strengthened, the whole regulations that are out in the market with the e-privacy. And the funny fact is that today, actually, people have been sitting together and actually just deciding to postpone the new regulation of e-privacy. So we don't think that it's gonna get in place before 2023, 25, but that's very unsure. And why is that the fact? Because the whole thing is actually quite complex. Because what you need to do is you need to combine legal regulations with tech regulations, and that's not that easy to say. But again, that's where we come into play, and I'll get into this a little bit more deeper later on. So once again, what does GDPR actually say? GDPR says that for tags, and tags, I mean cookies, pixel, IP addresses, personal data in general, right? Collect personal data, and personal data requires a legal basis. And the legal basis in this case is most of the time, if it's personal data, consent, right? So you need consent to actually process this personal data. And how does this look like in practice? I think this is where it gets a little easier. There's a data subject, which is a person, and this data subject visits a website. And what you now see is those banners, these nice design pieces on the website that sometimes are not more than a nice design piece. But what should actually happen is there should be some interface where you are able to actually get to give consent, right? And this is where a consent management platform just places itself in between the data subject and the actual website which tracks and processes data. And only after you've given consent, a controller or website is allowed to actually give your data to certain processors such as Google or Facebook or other big players in the market. So why am I talking to you guys here, and why are you guys here today at Usercentrics? Like I've already mentioned, consent. You need consent to actually process data. We are in a big data event today, right? So it's very important to have that clean data. And only with that clean data, you can actually have a successful business, right? However, consent and agreeing to a specific processor, let's say, also sounds very easy, right? But it actually isn't. A valid consent requires specific requirements, right? And this is basically just a listing of the requirements that you need to fulfill in order to have a legal consent. Consent needs to be given freely. A consent needs to be given informed, granular, explicit, prior, easy to opt out, and documented. Let me just give you some examples. Prior, let's say. If you visit a website, you need to be asked consent before any technology is using your data. Meaning that you enter the website and first thing that should happen is you should be asked for consent. However, what happens in reality is in the background, technology is already fired. So by that, you're basically not fulfilling the legal requirements of a solid consent. Another point is to be informed. You should be able to actually ask for more information to what you're actually consenting in. Because if you just get a banner message saying, are you agreeing that we are tracking any data, you might want to know what data is actually being tracked and who is actually gonna get that data. And this information also needs to be provided by the website provider. So consent needs to be informed. A consent also has to be given freely. For instance, you should not be forced to give consent. Like even if you say, no, I do not want to be tracked, you should be allowed to further use the website. And this is actually very interesting because what we currently see in the market is that there's a lot of websites that might comply with some of those legal requirements, but might not to others. So this is very important to understand, and where you guys can probably also have like a quick chat if you tomorrow or even tonight visit a website and just see, okay, how are they actually asking me for consent, and is this legally compliant or not? The important or the funny thing about the whole story is about the legal requirements that are out there is that even though there has been GDPR, even though there has been European court rulings based on GDPR, there's a lot of fines actually just happening out there in the market. A lot of companies are very reluctant to this law, right? They say, no, I don't need this right now, or I don't want this because I need my data. Data is very important to us. And the funny thing is that now it's not only legal regulations that kind of require you to get consent or obtain consent, but now also the big players such as Google or Facebook or other technical standards are basically requiring consent, right? And now what we're seeing is that companies are actually listening up and are like, oh, maybe I do need consent, because if I do not have consent or legally, let's say, correct consent, Google might not be able to like process my data. And then all my analytics and all my data will not be worth anything, because Google will just not process my data anymore if I have not obtained my data with a compliant consent. And that's where it gets that's where it kind of closes the circle, right? Big data, consent. So if you want to use your data and if you want other big players in the market to actually process your data, you need to obtain consent beforehand. This basically just summarizes what I've already said. Consent has an ROI in our opinion, and the opt-in rate is your new KPI. So what we're telling our customers basically is that you should start obtaining consent right now, because right now you have like this first mover advantage, right? Right now it's your chance to see all these regulations and this change in the market as an opportunity, as a chance to obtain clean data and be able to use them later on when Google or Facebook or other big players legally require the consent of your website and of your users. So what we as a consent management platform do, or what we specify in, is basically give tools to our customers on how they can optimize their opt-in rate, meaning that you're able to obtain the consent in a complete legally compliant way, but you also do have some flexibility. And we see ourselves as a SaaS software provider where we give specific tools to our customers and where they can basically balance the law and interpret the law and the current situation in the market on how they want to let's say define the regulations in order to have a certain balance, right? There's a legal risk and there's a business risk. The business risk is losing data, because if you play it hard, if you play a consent management platform hard, you can lose up to more than 50% of your data, and that's going to be a big loss. But if you do not have a consent management platform, there's not only fines and, let's say, illegal action, right? But there's also the risk of losing all the data in case at some point it gets required. So this is basically just a risk assessment and a balance that we see out there currently that our customers have to take, right? And we, like I said, as a software provider, see ourselves as a job just to give them the certain flexibility in that. So this is what I just said. Start collecting consents today and increase the value of your data, right? So those companies that have already gathered opt-in, and that's also our job, so we document the opt-ins that you obtain from your users, so you can also, like, let's say, withhold them in case of an audit, in case of someone asks you for them, and then that's going to be your data pressure in the future, and that's going to be basically your insurance, right? In order to make retargeting and marketing and advertising work in future. It even gets a little further. I've already talked about us seeing our responsibility in a way to give tools to our customers to optimize their opt-in rate, and that can be done through various ways, right? We've partnered up with Turbo. I don't know if anyone in this room knows the company Turbo, and what they do, they're specialized on also analytics and A/B testing, and what we're trying out with them currently is to like play specific incentive layers. For instance, a customer has visited your website and has opted out. The customer said, I do not want to be tracked, no thanks. So you need to give the customer the opportunity to use the website freely, like I've mentioned before. However, at some stage, while the customer is surfing through your website, you might want to ask him again and give him a little incentive for it. For instance, you might want to ask him, if you opt in now into the technologies that I'm using on my page, I would give you a 10% discount on your next purchase or something. So this is something that we're currently trying out. We are in close contact with our legal contacts there, because it all has to be in a balance. Because you're not allowed to basically push the user in a decision-making process where they do not have a free mind anymore. Like if I would offer them €1 million only to opt in, then it might not be a free choice that they're actually taking. So it all needs to be in a, let's say, legally and proper balance. But you can play around a little bit with this, right? So how much worth is the data for your customers and how much is it worth for you? And then find a certain balance. Concent does not only give you clean data, in our opinion, it also gives you peace of mind. Why is that? It protects you from fines, it secures your advertising revenues in future, and it strengthens your data sovereignty. It also strengthens trust towards your customers. That's also what we see. I mean, I don't think I have to tell you that privacy in general is in everyone's minds currently, with all the breaches happening and with all the news coming out there every day. So it's like specific topics that you just have to take into considerations. You can also lean back and focus on your core business again, and do not have to like worry about legal restrictions, legal regulations that are also changing very rapidly in the market, by the way. So we like to say we're like an insurance company. You might never need us, but if you need us, you're safe. I also wanted to show you some use cases so it just gets a little bit more clear what we're talking about or how our software looks like in action. I do not want to bore you, so I'm just going to click through it a little bit more quickly because I assume you guys all are aware of the cookie banners like you've seen on the first slide. Nevertheless, we think that our cookie banners look a little differently. So I just wanted to show you some of these examples. One of it, for instance, is Commerzbank. I think what can be seen very clearly in this screenshot is that it's very neatly integrated in the website. It's very adjusted to their CI. We are offering certain features such as self-hosting. This is also something that has to do with big data and data security that we see especially in the banking industry or insurance industry, where data is even a little bit more sensitive than maybe in other industries. And then we can see that there's no deny button. However, a deny button should be in the first layer concerning GDPR or based on GDPR. So this is what I meant beforehand of giving the customer a certain flexibility in implementing our cookie banners currently. But even with one click in our backend, they could just add the deny button here in wherever they wanted to have in order to be safe, right? In case it gets a little bit more strict. Another banking example is ING DiBa. Also here you can see it's a very different design. It looks differently. Also the messages in the banner strongly influence your opt-in rate, because the way you talk to your customers, the way you educate them about what's actually happening, why am I showing you this stupid banner that you're very annoyed of, and I know you are, but I do care. I care about your data and I want you to consent. So it really also depends on how you talk to your customers in this first layer. FC Bayern, I think everyone knows FC Bayern in this room. Also one of our customers, again, it looks very differently. Also with FC Bayern, by the way, we've done a lot of A/B testing. So we're working very closely together in how to optimize the opt-in rate. And this is what I've said about a KPI, a data KPI, because also for FC Bayern, obviously, data, big data is very important. So they're trying to find their way on how to optimize this current situation, on how to not lose that much of data while complying with legal regulations. Demaxco, also here you can see that the design is neatly integrated in the page. Also, the user has the option to like change their privacy settings at any point of time, and can have a granular consent set, right? Even though after you've visited the page and then you come back and then you decide, okay, I've changed my mind, I do not want to be tracked by Facebook anymore. And then you just go back and then you just opt out. And that shouldn't be a problem, it should be very easy actually. Last but not least, we're hiring. Even though it gets very cozy in here, and even though we do not have a single spot, we're actually sharing desks, the three of us. We're hiring. We're already looking for new office spaces, and we'll definitely move early next year. We do want to stay in the center of Munich, so it's going to be very close to this little nice office space. So in case you're looking for new opportunities, we're very happy to welcome you in our team. Kitty, who's also running around somewhere here, who did all these nice little snacks today, is part of our team. She's our happiness officer, and she provides us with very healthy vegan and vegetarian food every week. But this is only one part of our atmosphere that we share here in our company. So I will be here all night, so in case later we have a break, feel free to come over and chat. But for now, I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.